Now it's time for Thunder cover. The Oklahoman's Darnell Mayberry. Always great to catch up, Darnell. What's going on?
Not much. How you guys doing today?
Let's talk some Thunder before we get into this NBA Finals. Some decisions to be made over this offseason. Bring Martin back or not. Obviously made $12.5 last year. Jeremy Lamb there. Only going to have about $3 million before they hit that luxury tax threshold. So your thoughts, I keep hearing all this about Jeremy Lamb. He did great stuff there in Tulsa. You've been writing about it, been following that. Are you expecting, Darnell, them to rely on Jeremy Lamb to be that sharpshooter coming off the bench with the twos?
I am, and that's because he showed in Tulsa, and it's obviously different than the NBA, but he showed in the D-League with the 66ers that he has a lot of talent, and he proved that he's one of the best young prospects in the league. So when they have that guy on the roster, I don't see them exceeding the tax and embracing all the penalties that come with that just to keep Kevin Martin around. So I think they're going to try to keep Jeremy Lamb focused on developing and really being ready to step into a more prominent role next season.
How about DeAndre Liggins, man? I really liked his energy, his tenacity on defense. Didn't bring a lot offensively, but whenever he was on the court, you definitely felt his presence. Any chance he's going to stick around?
I hope so. I love DeAndre Liggins. Those that follow me on Twitter and read me regularly, they know that I love DeAndre Liggins because how can you not love a guy like that? I mean, the guy just goes out there and competes, gives everything he has. He never gives up on plays. There was one instance late in the season. I think it might have been the season finale, regular season finale. It was like 5 seconds left. The game was in doubt. DeAndre Liggins is still hustling for a loose ball. So guys like that, I just love. Nothing was ever handed to him. He started from the bottom, and he just carved out a career for himself. He's got a great personality, hard worker. So I think he embodies everything that the Thunder is about. So I don't see them letting him go. I think he's going to be back.
Big fan of DeAndre Liggins. I think all three of us right here. Plus, Darnell, you get him on the cheap. I mean, he's under $1 million a year. You can get him cheap. And what he brings, the energy, that level of defense right there, you need guys like that within your organization on your basketball team. So, as you said, I really hope that Sam Presti and this Oklahoma City Thunder organization keeps him around. I like what he brings to the table. On the other hand, Derek Fisher, I would not be at all saddened if he'd played his last basketball in Oklahoma City. I know that he had some big moments in some playoff games there, but I think all in all, if you take the whole body of work that we saw this year, Derek Fisher's prime has passed him. And I don't know if he brings much to the table, what this team is looking for with this Oklahoma City Thunder team.
So the playoffs didn't do anything for you guys. Derek Fisher's playoff performance, I thought that changed a lot of people's minds in terms of whether or not they wanted Derek Fisher back.
Didn't change my mind, Darnell.
Interesting. I wouldn't mind him being back if Scott Brooks knew how to manage his minutes better. That's the only thing. I mean, I think he's a great locker room presence. I think he can be helpful on the floor at times, space the floor, give you some perimeter shooting. But if you're playing a guy 15 to 20 minutes and it's coming at the expense of Reggie Jackson and Jeremy Lamb and DeAndre Liggins even, that's the issue that I have. And I don't think that they can afford to do that anymore. And that bringing him back puts Scott Brooks basically in gives him any temptation whatsoever to play Derek Fisher over those younger guys. You can't bring him back.
No, I agree. I mean, I guess what you could do is tell him to retire, and if you need him as an insurance policy late in the season, you just sign him back again like you have the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's funny how that's worked out. I mean, and it's worked out actually kind of well for the Thunder. That they didn't have to use him. He got to stay fresh and really just sit at home for a few months and then come in. And there is sort of an expectation that he might do that same thing this year or next year and just join the Thunder mid-season. I wouldn't be surprised if he did, but I really do think the Thunder at this point needs to embrace the youth movement and move forward with Reggie Jackson and Jeremy Lamb.
Darnell, have you had a chance to catch up with Russ at all since the surgery? Lately, obviously he was on crutches here just a few weeks ago, but is he progressing nicely? Is everything going as planned with his rehab?
from everything I hear, everything is on schedule. I have not spoken with Russell Westbrook since his exit interview a few weeks back, but by all accounts, he's progressing as scheduled, and he should be ready to go for training camp.
Hey, Darnell, before we hit a break here, just want to get your thoughts on this. Karl Malone today leaves Michael Jordan off his all-time starting five. Have you put together a list of your starting five? Dusty and I had ours a little while ago. Wanted to compare it to your list if you had one.
How about I think about it over the break? You guys share yours with me now.
All right, we got the exact same one, Darnell. We did not look off each other. We both like Magic. We like Jordan. We like LeBron, Tim Duncan. And I don't know, we're both big fans of Shaquille O'Neal. I think, well, I was talking about this earlier, I think Shaquille O'Neal, one of the more underrated centers. I don't think he never goes to the top of anybody's list, but I know that everybody loves Kareem, everybody loves Hakeem, everybody loves Bill Russell. I think that Shaquille O'Neal, the way he dominated, the force that he was for probably about an 8 to 10 year window, I think one of the more dominant forces the NBA's ever seen, and I love me some Shaq, man.
Yeah, it's hard to go wrong. When you start talking about great players like that, I don't think you can go wrong, unless you're Karl Malone and you leave Michael Jordan off the list. But let me give it some thought. I'll get to you guys after the break.
Let's get back to Thunder Cover with NewsOK.com and the Oklahomans. Darnell Mayberry. All right, Darnell, your all-time starting five NBA roster. Who you got?
All right, I got Magic Johnson. Gotta have Magic. Gotta have Jordan, obviously. That's a no-brainer. And then I disagreed with you guys on the last three. I got Larry Bird over LeBron. I need some perimeter shooting. LeBron is still streaky from beyond the arc. I gotta have some perimeter shooting on my team. I think Larry Bird fills that role. Then I got Bill Russell. He's sort of like my Serge Ibaka. He's gonna come by, sit back and clean up everything. He's gonna be my interior defense and protection of the rim. Then I got Wilt Chamberlain. I loved you guys pick a Shaq, but I got like the Shaq before Shaq. I mean, that's Wilt Chamberlain. I could dump it down to him. I could get some low post scoring, and I can also get some defense from him. So that's my five: Magic, Jordan, Bird, Russell, and Wilt Chamberlain.
One-on-one, who you taking, LeBron or Bird?
If they're playing one-on-one, who gets the ball first?
Whoever.
Jump ball,
man. You listen, Larry Bird, and I can't go back and say that I remember a lot of that stuff that went down in the '80s. But I mean, I definitely watched Larry Bird play. But as great as he was, I think LeBron might be. I think LeBron might be on a different level. Is he the perimeter shooter? No chance. But if you're asking me who's the better player, who I'm taking right there, I don't know. I just got to go with King James. Let's talk about King James as they win Game 7 against the Indiana Pacers. And I got to give it up. Gave you props yesterday. You called it, man. You said you were smelling a blowout, and you were dead on the money with that one.
Yeah, it just had the makings of it. I mean, you could see that Miami is a championship team. And, we saw it in Game 5 with the Thunder last year. When they turn it on and guys start making shots, it's hard to cut that off. And I think that's what the Pacers ran into. And it basically it got worse. They hung in there for maybe a quarter, the first quarter, and then the Heat just turned it on. LeBron had a terrific quarter, and that was the end of the Pacers. But I don't think young teams can hang with championship teams like that. And I think this isn't a popular opinion, but I think this finals is probably the best matchup possible if you're a fan of the game. Not a fan of the Thunder, but Spurs Heat, I think, is a much more competitive final series than the Thunder Heat would have been, just because the Thunder seems to have that little brother syndrome against the Heat. It's something mental with the Thunder when it comes to the Heat that they just can't get them over that hump. That's why they've lost 5 of the last 6 or 6 straight, something like that. So I just think the Spurs are going to be much more competitive than the Thunder would have been against the Heat.
Darnell, this is a what-if question, I know, but just watching how the Pacers pushed Miami to the brink there, I can't help but think about it. If Chicago has Derrick Rose and they're healthy with Luol Deng and Heinrich and all those guys are healthy, I mean, what would that series have looked like with the Heat?
I think it would have been a great series, and I think the Bulls would have had a legitimate chance of knocking off the Heat. I got, all my in-laws live up in Chicago. They're Bulls, Cubs, White Sox fans, all of that. So I had a good debate going with my brother-in-law saying, hey, if Derrick Rose comes back, the Bulls have a chance. Now, not if he came back in the playoffs, but if he came back around the All-Star break and could sort of work himself into some conditioning and get his rhythm back, I thought the Bulls would have had a great chance. That's why, and I love Derrick Rose. I was disappointed that he made his decision to sit out. I understood why he did it. He wants to make sure he's 100% and not try to come back and have to carry that team and that franchise and not be sure of himself. But I would have really liked to see him come back and try to fight with his teammates and give that Bulls franchise a chance to knock off the Heat, because I think they would have been able to do it.
This is Thunder Cover with NewsOK.com and the Oklahomans' Darnell Mayberry. Let's look at this NBA Finals coming up starting tomorrow night. As you mentioned, San Antonio Spurs been resting. It'll be 9 days since the last time that they played, and this is the Miami Heat team coming off a big win, probably the best that they looked definitely in that series. Dwayne Wade kind of woke up. I didn't understand Dwayne Wade's I understood him, but I hate to hear this when I hear Dwayne Wade basically say, like, well, it's Game 7. It's a different mentality. It's a different level of aggression, I'm going to attack differently. Basically, I'm going to play entirely different into Game 7. I think if this Heat team is going to win, and I'm going to pick them to win in 7, they're going to need Dwayne Wade and everybody to have that mentality from Game 1. If they don't have that sense of urgency against this San Antonio Spurs team, Spurs can come in and make it a quick series because they're that talented, they're that deep.
Yeah, you're right, and especially you hit the nail on the head. It's this Spurs team. I mean, they can do that with anybody else, almost anybody else. They tried to play with fire against the Pacers, nearly got burned. The Bulls played them tough for a little bit. But there's a handful of teams that, you better bring your best against. And I think the Spurs definitely, for the Heat, are at the head of that class. And I think it's not just on a game-to-game basis with the Spurs, but it's also possession to possession, because they don't make mistakes. That's the thing that cost the Pacers that series, is all those mental mistakes. I mean, how many times did they, just fumble the ball out of bounds or dribble it off their foot or throw careless passes? So the Spurs don't make those mistakes, and if they do, I'd be shocked. So the Heat have their hands full, and it's going to be a heck of a series.
Darnell, I got to ask you, if the Spurs win Game 1, it's going to be because they were rested and ready to go. If they lose, it's going to be, 9 days off, they were rusty. What do you think? Do you think this extended period of rest, is this going to affect them?
I think so, but I don't see it affecting them beyond the first quarter. I think the first quarter, it could be a slow start by both teams, not just the Spurs. I think, whenever you go, we saw with the Thunder going from the Rockets to the Grizzlies, whenever you go from one series to the next like that, there's a filling out period that needs to take place, and I think both teams will be trying to fill each other out and kind of really see how the series is going to go. But after the first quarter, especially in the second half, I think the Spurs will have regained their rhythm, and they'll be okay. Also, one thing I should say, guys, is I think the way this finals series sets up, I think it favors the team without home court advantage, because if the Spurs, remember now, it goes from 2-2, 1-1-1 to 2-3-2, and if the Spurs can get one of those in Miami, one of those first two in Miami, then they got 3 home games in San Antonio to close it out. So that's going to be tough for the Heat to go in there and win in San Antonio. So look out for that, too, if the Spurs get one of these first 2 in Miami.
That's what I was going to ask both you guys. I just written it down. That's what I want to bring up. This 2-3-2 format, we saw last year Oklahoma City loses Game 2, and they never get a chance. They have the home court advantage, but it never gets back to Oklahoma City. Your thoughts on the 2-3-2 style? Are you a proponent of that, or you like the way they do it, 2-2-1-1-1?
Well, I understand why they have to do it for travel purposes and, that sort of thing, but I would like to, I don't like change. I'm sort of like a grumpy old man in that sense. I don't like change, and I sort of resist change, but I would like to see some consistency and just keep the format the way it is in the first and second round in the conference finals. So, but it is the way it is, and I think the teams have to know that going in, and Miami's going to have to protect its home court. As simple as that. If you want to be a champion, you got to protect your home court, and if Miami does that, it shouldn't be an issue.
Who's the health going to affect more? You know, with Ginobili been banged up a little bit, Tony Parker's been banged up a little bit. Now we see D. Wade has been struggling at times, and then miraculously it looks like he's fine. So is there a team that's more healthy right now?
I think it's the Spurs. You know, not only have they had that rest, but I think the Heat's injuries are sort of chronic injuries. Like Wade's knee is not getting any better until this summer when he can drain it or have surgery or whatever he needs to do on it. So, Dwayne Wade, you know, he had a much better game in Game 7. But if you go back and watch that game, Wade got most of his buckets off of putbacks and hustle plays and, you know, offensive rebounds. He was just kind of out-hustling the Pacers. But he still missed a lot of good looks that he had been missing in Games 1 through 6. So I didn't see much difference in Dwayne Wade aside from the fact that he was just hustling and he willed himself to have a much better performance. So he's going to have to do that at least 4 more times in order for the Heat to beat the Pacers, and I'm not sure if he's going to be able to do that.
Ray Allen chipped in last game, started out the game 3 for 3 from 3. Some of those others, as we talk about, kind of stepped up. You know, Mike Miller last year in the NBA Finals was huge. Shane Battier in that game, too, was really big from deep. So Miami's definitely going to have some others because we do know one thing about the Spurs. Probably the deepest team in basketball. They have plenty of others. We know about their big three, but they have plenty of others. Of these two big threes, who's going to outperform who? Miami's big three or San Antonio's?
Well, everybody sort of assumes Chris Bosh is going to have a much better series now that he doesn't have to go against the size and the length of Roy Hibbert. I'm not so sure. He's still got to go against Tim Duncan and Thiago Splitter, which, I mean, Tim Duncan is better than Roy Hibbert still to this day at 37 years old or whatever he is. So, and Thiago Splitter is one of the most improved players in the league. I mean, his development has been phenomenal to watch. So I think Chris Bosh still could struggle at times in this series, not to the extent that he did in the Eastern Conference Finals, but I think he's got his hands full. And also, you know, Ginobili, yeah, he might be banged up, but he doesn't have to necessarily score for that Spurs team. I think that's another thing to keep an eye on. He can take over the point guard duties and really just run the pick and roll and get everyone else involved and make plays that way. So, and the Heat really doesn't have anybody that can guard him. I think Norris Cole and Mario Chalmers are too small, and then Ray Allen doesn't have a chance. So, you know, I think Ginobili has an advantage, even though he might be banged up because of his playmaking ability. So I give the advantage to the Spurs' big three. And Tony Parker, I didn't even mention Tony Parker. The guy is probably playing the best in the playoffs of anyone. So that guy is an amazing competitor and player, so he's going to probably control the pace of the game.
He is. Exciting to see if LeBron James is going to spend some time covering him. And, you know, this you're talking about Chris Bosh right there. I agree with what you're saying. The only thing I would say is different, though, is Roy Hibbert's got a much bigger body, bigger frame, leaning on Chris Bosh. At least with Tim Duncan, he's lost some weight. He doesn't have that size. It's not going to be quite as a physical series for Chris Bosh, but Tim Duncan's still highly skilled. This is how I see it going down, Darnell, and I want to get your take. Every way I look at this thing, I think San Antonio is the deeper team. I think the more rested, the more healthy team. But the one caveat I have is LeBron James. And I know he cannot win it all by himself, but I think as we saw a year ago against the Oklahoma City Thunder, as it took 7, they're down 3-2 in that Eastern Conference Finals. They win that Game 6 in the Garden. They win that Game 7, and they roll into Oklahoma City, playing really good basketball. And I kind of feel the same thing in this series. I got it going 7, and I think this is the championship that really solidifies this big three coming together as they go to 3 straight NBA Finals and win 2 in a row.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that, and I said Heat in 7, and I sort of want to stick to that, but, man, the more and more I think about it, I really could see the Spurs winning in 6, just because when we saw the Heat turn up their defensive pressure against Indiana in Game 7, the Spurs are just as capable of doing that to a team like the Heat. And when they play defense and when they get out and transition and move the ball in the half court, they're tough to guard defensively, and they're tough to stop offensively. So I want to say Heat in 7, but I could easily see the Spurs winning in 6.
Wait a second. So which is it, Darnell?
You're going to put me on the spot. I'm going to go against the grain just because I don't like to follow the crowd. I'm going to say the Spurs win in 6.
Okay, Spurs in 6. Ted and I both got the Heat in 7. I think nonetheless, I think we're in for a treat. I think it's going to be a really good NBA Finals, Darnell.
All right, guys, enjoy it.